class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing some big and exciting news, and that is that the San Jose Sharks have signed their first overall draft pick, Macklin Celebrini, to an entry-level contract. Now, some people might be seeing this news and thinking, well, wasn't this an inevitability to happen? And sort of, yes, there was a very good chance that Celebrini would sign a contract, but it wasn't as much of a sure thing as certain other high draft picks or former first overall picks have been in the past. And the major reason for that is the fact that Celebrini is a college player. You see, when it comes to players coming out of the CHL, coming out of the junior leagues, to use, let's say, Sharks draft pick Sam Dickinson as an example, it is quite trivial to get an entry-level contract done because even if that gets signed, they can head back to the OHL or the WHL anyway for the following year with pretty much no difference to it. And that's why you have seen, perhaps yesterday, many of the other high draft picks in the draft this year getting their entry-level deals signed with their respective teams. But for Celebrini, being a college player, if you are under a professional contract, you cannot play in the NCAA. So to go back to last season, this was the reason why Will Smith didn't immediately sign an entry-level deal with the San Jose Sharks. He wanted to go back to Boston College for another year, and he simply cannot be under contract with the Sharks if he wanted to do that. And so with Celebrini, if he wanted to go back to Boston University, he had to specifically avoid signing this deal. And there is precedent of this happening with a first overall pick. Actually, in the recent past, back in 2021, the Buffalo Sabres drafted Owen Power with their first overall selection, and he decided to head back to the University of Michigan for the following season. And so he did not sign an ELC with Buffalo until about March of that year to play the last few games of the season. So it was certainly not a guarantee that Celebrini wouldn't decide to pull a similar move, and you could tell he was holding his cards very close to his chest in the weeks leading up to the draft. Pretty much every person who interviewed him asked him that question of whether or not he was deciding to go pro the following year, and he made sure to always keep it extremely safe and say, well, there are still conversations that need to be had. It was really once the draft occurred and Mike Grier seemed very confident that a deal would happen and that Macklin Celebrini would make the jump to the NHL, that it did start to seem like a more clear path to getting this deal done. But even still, Celebrini was trying to keep things relatively hazy about what his intentions were. However, a couple of days ago, development camp did conclude. Celebrini had a quote in which he said that he expects a decision to be made very quickly after the camp's conclusion. And so by that point, here, it's not that surprising news to see that the deal does get done, and Celebrini will, in fact, officially be a San Jose Shark come next season. And with Mike Grier's very strong messaging, again reiterated today, that he expects Celebrini to be a full-time NHLer next season, that seems to indicate that there's not going to be much time, if at all, spent with the Barracuda, and he will immediately be a contributor for the main team. And this is some huge news for the San Jose Sharks, and really the beginning of a new era for this franchise. The last 5 years have been extremely depressing. That first one that they missed the playoffs, coming off of a Western Conference Finals finish, and then suddenly finding themselves third last in the league without a first-round pick, extremely sad. Then the next couple of years was Doug Wilson trying to scratch and claw his way back to a competitive aspect when it was clear that it was done and needed to be rebuilt. The last couple of seasons has been Mike Grier completely stripping down the roster, getting rid of every positive aspect that has been on the team, bottoming out there as fourth last in the league, and then this past season as last place in the league, just flat out. But now, with Celebrini getting brought to the roster, with Will Smith getting brought to the roster, with some signings that have been made here, there is that light at the end of the tunnel. Now we can see a true plan laid out by Mike Grier of how the Sharks will progress over the coming years. And while this might still not be a hyper-competitive season, it's very possible the Sharks will still be a basement dweller. It's even a chance that the Sharks will still finish in last place. There's going to be finally some excitement in the air for San Jose, much more so than there has been for the last half decade. Now, Celebrini should find himself immediately in the Sharks' top 6 next year. As I mentioned in my free agency video, it is seemingly expected that Logan Couture will at the very least not start the season with the Sharks this upcoming year just due to his injury. That seemed to be the case for why Alex Wennberg got signed to a contract. Wennberg will likely be the third-line center. Celebrini will get the chance in the top 6 either as the second-line center or the first-line center depending on performance. And the Sharks have gone out and they've tried to address their major top 6 issues to try and surround Celebrini with some strong talent. This was a major issue in a way last season with the Chicago Blackhawks and their first overall pick, Connor Bedard. He was an elite talent and still had an extremely successful season, just under a point per game with the 60 points he had in 60 odd games, but he didn't necessarily have a ton of fantastic teammates with him that he was able to work off of. But with Mike Grier bringing in someone like Tyler Toffoli, and with the chance that he could play with a William Eklund or Fabian Zetterlund, who are capable top 6 players, Celebrini's going to have all the help that he needs to have success in this first season. And so the expectations are quite lofty for him. He's expected to be competitive for the Calder Memorial Trophy as the league's best rookie, with some very, very high level of competition in this upcoming season, primarily someone like Matvei Mishkov, who signed his entry-level deal a few days ago with the Philadelphia Flyers. But it seems as though he might be able to do it. So 60 points like Connor Bedard did last year, that is a very real possibility. You don't want to put a ton of pressure on this guy going into his first professional season at the NHL level. It can be tough as an adjustment, but many believe he is NHL ready. I believe he is NHL ready, and things are absolutely looking up for the San Jose Sharks as an organization at this point. I, for one, am extremely excited and cannot wait for the season to start. Class dismissed.